La la, la la la, la la. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, to, I think it's working. Are we here? Are we on? Are we good? It appears to be good. So now I can do this and say hi. Welcome to Podcast Pontifications, or at least the live taping thereof. My name is Evo Terra. Thanks for joining me. Today, for the brand new people, you are about to watch the live taping of a podcast. No, this is not the actual podcast, just the live taping. All the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, the things I'm saying right now, no one's going to hear but you. Like my coughing here. No one's going to hear that but you, because you chose to listen to the live taping, and I appreciate you doing that. If you want to skip, however, you can, because make that 3 hours from now, the fully edited version of this podcast will be available at podcastpontifications.com, along with an article. Takes all the words I'm about to say. I then use the fingers to rewrite those words into something that makes much more sense for when you're reading it. Because that's important. And those things get published at Podcast Pontifications at 10 o'clock every Phoenix day of Monday through Thursday while the show is in season. And for the people who have signed up for Podcast Pontifications in your inbox, that is the email version of the show, they will get the link to the audio file and the article emailed to them. So no waiting. It's the fastest way to get the content, believe it or not, is email. Yes, because of things. Or you can subscribe in your favorite podcast app, and most of them that aren't named Apple will also update really frequently. Good morning, Arlen. Nice to see you here again, sir. I do have a chat window open for you on the live streaming. If you would like to say hello to me, whether you're watching on LinkedIn like Arlen is, or you're watching on Facebook, or you're watching on Twitter, or even the YouTube Live, I will see those comments because of Restream, which is a new tool that I'm using to put this out everywhere. It gives me a chat window to do that. But the topic of conversation today is getting Fickle podcast listeners to listen more to your podcast. We don't talk a lot about fickle, seasonal type listeners, and I think it's time that we should. It's been on my mind for a bit because I'm a fickle podcast listener sometimes. I'll bet you are too. Maybe not, but just so you know, there are people out there who are quite fickle. So we're going to talk about that on the program. Oh, yes. That is the plan of attack today. Hey, real quick also, just so you are aware, as I think, at least I know that Arlen here, who knows, the show Podcast Pontifications will be going on its seasonal break at the end of this month. So what do I got? 15, 20 episodes or so, if that. Not probably 15. And then the show will be on break in preparation for season 4, mostly for my own mental health. I like to take a break because, as you might imagine, it takes a fair amount of effort to do this every single day, well, Monday through Thursday at least, with a new topic every day. It's a lot. So I'll take off the month of June. I'm also going to take off the first part of July because we're traveling back to see some family in the middle of the country, driving back to see a whole bunch of people. So I won't be back here in the studio until like mid-July when the show will commence. And when the show commences, there'll be some changes. I think you're going to like all of the changes. Like, it's still going to be me delivering Podcast Pontifications, which you've tuned in to really enjoy, but with some extra bits to it. There's also some new membership and sponsorship opportunities which will be coming forward on Podcast Pontifications, which is very nice. I've already had some positive responses from people on that. So I'm not ready to announce anything just yet. I will do that as soon as I possibly can. But if you want to get in on that early, and you want to have some of the membership, have its privileges, the best way to do that is to go to buymeacoffee.com/evoterra and sign up for a membership. I like single, coffee donations. I appreciate that very much. But if you sign up for a recurring membership, I'm going to grandfather all those people into the new stuff that I'm working on. So for now, buymeacoffee.com/evoterra if you feel like doing that. Up to you. Right. I'm wearing my Podcast Junkie shirt today. It's very yellow. I get that because a little later today I'm going to be interviewed by Harry on Podcast Junkies, and I thought, we should both wear the t-shirt. And the funny story, if you're not listening to the Podcast Junkies, this is a fun show, podcast about podcasting, where Harry digs into the people who are making the podcast like me. I actually took this shirt off of Harry. And literally took it off of his body the last time we saw each other at a conference. I know, weird, but it happened that way. All right, enough of me rambling around. I think we're ready to go with the actual live programming here. As you know, I like to read out my cold open. And by the way, this show is going to be a lot about the cold open. Here we go. A little digging into your podcast stats will show a good number of your listeners are, well, fickle. Before you can convert them to loyal listeners, you have to get them listening to more episodes. All right, those are the words that I wrote down. Those are the ones I'm going to say. I just need to now move the chat window so it's not in my face. Turn on the QuickTime. Get that going. Okay, on the count of... Now, a little digging into your podcast stats will show that a good number of your listeners are, well, fickle. Before you can convert them to loyal listeners, you have to get them listening to more episodes. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. We don't talk about fickle or seasonal listeners enough. And when we do talk about fickle or seasonal listeners, it's all about how we convert them into loyal, rabid listeners who devour every single word that we say. And while I like that as an idea, it's not very realistic. Because everybody is busy. And a good percentage of your listeners don't and will never listen to every single episode you put out. You probably recognize and understand this. Now, caveat, if you're doing a fiction podcast, very different situation for you. Serial podcasters, especially fiction podcasters, don't really have this problem because no rational listener, no rational person decides to not listen to chapter 7 of a novel. Not going to happen for them. But for the rest of us, people, they get busy. And I think we have two different tools. We podcasters have two different tools that we can better employ to ensure that these fickle listeners, sometimes seasonal listeners, they only listen like during the summertime or whatever, we can ensure that they don't really miss out on something that they wanted to hear. Just two tools. And again, I'm talking about listeners who are probably subscribed to your show or are following your show who choose not to listen to your episodes. Two tools that you can employ right now to start fixing that. What are those two tools? Stop teasing, Evo. Title and cold open. Yeah, I've harped on title a lot, so I'm just going to do a brief recap and give you two very short rules for title, and we'll get to the fun part. Two rules for titling. One, make every character count. Rule number 2, give them a reason to hit play. Your title should make every character count, no extra bits. And you should give them, the title it should give them a reason to actually hit play on that episode. No, the guest name's not enough. Publishing date's not really important. No hashtags. Okay, enough of title. Let's get to the fun part. The fun part is the cold open. Because once people have actually hit play on an episode, they're probably going to keep listening once they've hit play. But what about those who never saw the title of your episode and who didn't hit play, but the podcast episode just started playing? Now, that happens a lot because people spend a lot of time, your listener has spent a lot of time setting up their podcast listening queue, not just of your podcast episodes, but of all the other podcasts and episodes that they subscribe to. They have a queue, or several queues like I do, and they start the queue and they let it roll through. It just plays. When you think of the mindset of these people, like me, and probably like you, I'm always thinking about, wonder what else is in here. When something plays, and I've got, maybe a dozen shows in there, but when an episode starts to play, I have anticipation of, maybe it's FOMO. What's the next thing below this? I've only got a certain amount of time. What's below this episode that I'm not seeing because I'm not looking at it right now? What else is in there? I might decide to swipe left, or is it right? Podcast apps are weird. Whatever the swiping is to delete it, people oftentimes will start listening to an episode that, again, they didn't hit play on. It just started playing for them because it's in their queue. They'll swipe off if they think that it is somehow less important than something else a little bit lower in their queue. And that's where a cold open really, really helps. It's the opening statement. I did one at the beginning of this episode, and every episode I do. I do that because I want to hook someone in who didn't explicitly hit play. And it's also for the people who hit play to kind of set them up of what's going on, right? Because honestly, it's okay if someone listens to the cold open you put out and they say, this episode's not for me, I can skip this one and go on. Hey, that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. They don't have to listen to every single thing. That's not the social contract we have put in place here. I want to make a cold open. You want to make a cold open. We all want to make a cold open that says, this is what you're going to get in this episode. If you were intrigued by the words I just said in those 200 characters, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then keep listening. But if not, hey, that's okay. I appreciate you subscribing. That's what we're saying when we make these cold opens. So stick with a good cold open. Put a good cold open in if you don't have one. Very helpful to keep people listening all the way through. And make sure your titles are better, would you? So I need to thank Ms. I need to thank Betty Danowitz, of the podcast If You Ask Betty, for this topic suggestion. She actually had me on speaking to a class that she's teaching right now on the value of the cold open. And I thought I'd bring it back for everybody to enjoy. So thank you again, Betty, for bringing this idea up. You see, Fickle, that's the word I'm looking for. Fickle and seasonal podcasters are a part of podcasting. Fickle and seasonal listeners, I should say, are a part of podcasting. Unfortunately, fickle podcasters are too. No, fickle listeners are podcasting. It's life. What are we going to do, right? So share this episode with another podcaster so maybe they can also help better understand why some episodes are listened to, why some are not, and maybe we can, not only get them to have more more people listening to their content, but also so all podcasters are helping better serve this underserved listener set of people who are fickle, because we're not going to not make them fickle. We can try, but we just need to appeal to them. So if you liked what I had to say in this episode, please go to buymeacoffee.com/evoterra and buy me a virtual coffee. If you would like to, also consider membership. Consider buying that means you buy me a coffee every month, automatically, simple little thing. Because I've got some new membership and some new things coming out when season 4 of this podcast launches in a couple of months. And I'm going to grandfather in all the people who are at the membership, who have purchased a membership of coffee, to me on buymeacoffee.com/evoterra. So go over and do that if you would like to. Yes, that's it. I shall be back tomorrow with yet another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers. Stop that recording. Go check the chat room. No chats in the chat room, so I will just simply say thanks again, Arlen, for commenting in the chat room. Thanks for all of you who are listening to this, wherever you happen to be listening to it on. If you just caught it, you can go to podcastpontifications.com. That's where the final version will be in 3 hours and, does the math, 47 minutes. No, 2 hours and 47 minutes. There we go. Math is hard today. Sorry about that. And tomorrow morning, I'll do this once again. It happens at 7 o'clock Phoenix, Arizona time, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday while it's in season. It is broadcasted, because that's what happens. It's streamed, better way to say it, on YouTube at the Podcast Pontifications YouTube page. It's on Facebook. Where the hell is it on Facebook? Is it on Podcast Pontifications Facebook page? Facebook. Yeah, it is the Podcast Pontifications Facebook page, but you didn't know there is a Podcast Pontifications Facebook page in anticipation of the Facebooking. It goes on my Twitter account at Evoterra, and obviously LinkedIn, which is where most people are still consuming it, like Arlen, who already said good morning to me, and I shall say good morning to him. Right, let's get this episode done. Shall I? I shall. You all have a lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.